This happened to me in my sophomore year of high school. Some people listening to this may have heard about the story when it happened, as it was all over the news. But I would like to tell my story anonymously for personal reasons. But you can call me Damien. I was in my second period English class. I am in a special ed program. Just throwing that out there for you to keep in mind for context. That day my teacher, Mr. Wade, had a scavenger hunt planned for us in the schoolyard. Mr. Wade is one of those teachers who I really enjoy being around and look forward to seeing every day. We all left the classroom to go to the front of the building. Mr. Wade then gave us a checklist of things to hunt for, and we all set out. So there I was with my friend Ellen, looking for what was listed, when out of the corner of my eye, I saw a black van parked near the schoolyard. There appeared to be somebody in the driver's seat, watching us. I then walked over to Mr. Wade and asked if the van belonged to any of the staff. I don't think so. Let's go ask the front office ladies if they know anything about it. Once the front office claimed that they knew nothing about the black van, I began to feel uneasy. Mr. Wade then told the rest of the class to come back inside. I could tell he was also feeling a bit apprehensive. At this time, Mr. Wade was by the school's front entrance, ushering the rest of the students back inside. When I made a poor decision, I approached the van to get a better look. I then noticed that the van's driver's side door was now open. Before I knew it, somebody had a hold of me and was forcing me into the van. I yelled for Mr. Wade to come help me, but it was too late. I was shoved into the van, and I began shouting at the top of my lungs, "Let me go! Let me go!" The man who kidnapped me looked me dead in the eye and said, "Shut up, kid, and don't try anything. You keep yelling like that, and I'll have to kill you." I then shouted, "Mr. Wade, help me!" I was then knocked unconscious. A while later I woke up, still in the van. The kidnapper had duct taped my hands behind my back and my mouth shut. We seemed to be parked somewhere away from the school. You're awake. You just sit there and be a good boy and don't make a sound. We're going to go for a little drive soon. Everything will be fine. I can't describe how scared I was in that moment. My mind was racing, thinking about what this lunatic had planned for me. I can only remember brief flashes of what happened next. The driver's side window was shattered. I heard Mr. Wade's voice shouting. The van suddenly drove away, and the kidnapper became enraged, cursing up a storm. He eventually pulled over and exited the van, and that was the last I saw of him. To make a long story short, after the van left the school, with me inside of it, Mr. Wade immediately jumped into his own car and followed it to a parking lot a mile down the road. Once he saw it come to a stop, he snuck up to the driver's window and smashed it with a rock, hoping to take the kidnapper by surprise. However, he was able to pull away. For whatever reason, even though the kidnapper managed to escape Mr. Wade, he lost his nerve and abandoned me and the van on the side of the road. The police obviously got involved, and the man was arrested later that day. But if it wasn't for Mr. Wade, I probably wouldn't be here today telling this story. I want to forget about what happened, but this is something that you can never forget, no matter how hard you try. I just want everyone to be aware that there are evil people in this world that will strike when you least expect it. And if you see a sketchy vehicle parked somewhere it shouldn't be, for your own sake, don't approach it. A bit of backstory. In August of 2012, my mother-in-law was out on her morning walk, the same route she had taken since 1988. She had just received the all-clear on her breast cancer, and things were looking up. However, during her walk that day, a driver on his way to church lost control of his truck, crashing into a speed limit sign before swerving into the sidewalk, then proceeded to hit my mother-in-law, dragging her 100 feet before he came to a stop. Needless to say, my husband and I were devastated. Her loss left a deep scar on my soul. I was very close with her, which made the events of what happened after she departed this world all the more tragic. For a while, our family was living in a haze. We could not properly say goodbye, as she was unrecognizable. I can't even tell you how I managed to get through this ordeal. It was just one day at a time, I guess. 6 days after my mother-in-law's funeral, I purchased my first home. She got to see pictures of the house and helped me pick out paint colors prior to her death. We tried our best to move forward, changing from the apartment to the house, painting, cleaning, packing, moving, all that fun stuff. Trying to take our minds off the heartache and focus on fixing up the house, but her death still lingered and made these tasks even harder. By Christmas of that year, things had gotten worse. Christmas was her favorite holiday, and it would be our first without her. My husband had already been struggling with undiagnosed mental problems, ones that didn't seem to manifest until after we got married. There were no red flags during our dating phase or engagement period. He would try to numb it by drinking and using drugs. The death of his mother escalated things dramatically. That year, I struggled to decorate our home. None of us were in the holiday spirit. However, for the first time, I finally got to use this huge tree my godmother had given me several years prior. I was never able to set it up, as all the places we lived in before were too small for this tree. So after weeks of decorating and trying to meet my husband's unreasonable demands, I did what I could to satisfy at least one of his personalities. More on that later. As December 25th approached, he decided to gift himself with a bottle of whiskey and share some with the neighbors. We went to their house for a small get-together. However, when we returned to our house across the street, he decided that he was not quite finished with the bottle and continued to drink it until it was gone. At this point, he decides to pick a fight with me, although I can't remember what it was about. I do remember it was about Christmas. He goes off on a tangent about trees and Santa, etc., not being the real reason for Christmas. He was Catholic, and I'm not, so I reminded him that I was fully aware of the reason for Christmas, but that it was also about spending time with your family, and it's okay to indulge in a little consumerism every once in a while. This sets him off even more. He decides to pull my huge Christmas tree to the ground and does a sweep of the mantle, sending decorations crashing to the floor. He then proceeded to the kitchen and began to throw things against the wall. There was no Christmas decorations in there, but there was a family crystal bowl of mine that got tossed. This all happened in a matter of seconds. I had no time to react, and I could do nothing to stop him from doing more damage. He then made his way to the garage, which was connected to the kitchen, leaving me in the house, looking around the destroyed living room and the wrecked kitchen. All I could do was cry. I consider myself to be a strong person, but at that moment, I was broken. My world came crashing down around me. I didn't know what to do. Tears came rolling down my face as I picked up the shattered pieces of the antique family ornaments so that my dogs wouldn't step on anything and hurt themselves. At this point, my husband had come out of the garage. He didn't say a word as he walked through the glass and debris and straight to the bedroom, leading me to think that he was going to bed. How wrong I was. I settled down on the couch, thinking about what the hell I was going to do, when I heard him screaming and yelling,
"I'll kill everyone! Do you hear me? I'll kill everyone!"
So I ended up texting his best friend, we'll call him Jack, asking him to come over since I couldn't seem to calm him down. When my husband returned to the living room, he had both of his pistols in his hands. As I stated before, he had no recorded history of mental illness, so he had no issues purchasing firearms in the past. He sets one of his guns down and pulls me off the couch, throwing me to the ground. I don't want to go into too much detail about what happened next, but I want to make it clear that he did not threaten me with the weapons, but he did try to get me to end his life. I finally got my hands free and continued to cry, begging him to stop. He sets his guns down on the floor and walked back into the garage. I quickly scooped them up to hide them. I called up my neighbors, the ones that we had visited earlier that night, and asked them if I could bring over the handguns for safekeeping. Thankfully, they were still awake, and they agreed to help me. The faster I got these out of the house, the better. Once I dropped them off, my neighbor, we'll call her Susan, came back over with me to make sure I was okay. She had seen the hand mark on my arm from where he pulled me off the couch. She even went out into the garage to talk with him. I was hoping it would calm him down, but this didn't seem to help. Before she left, she said that I could stay over at her place for the night, saying that since he's the one who made this mess, he could clean it up. Looking back, I think the only person that would have gotten through to him that night would have been his mother. I was still picking up glass, and I told her that I would be okay, and thanked her for coming over and trying to defuse the situation, and that I would come back over in a few days to get the guns, after everything had hopefully settled down. My husband's friend Jack shows up a short time later, and immediately goes into the garage. Honestly, I regretted calling him. I didn't know what my husband was doing in the garage, but he wasn't bothering me or destroying stuff around the house. After talking with Jack, he comes out and begins to yell and scream at me.
Why would you call Jack over here? I said I'd kill everyone, don't you remember?
Jack gets between us and tries calming him down. He turns back and addresses me. It's probably not a good idea for you to be here right now. At this point, I had had enough of his shit. I took up Susan on her offer, hoping that it would give him time to cool off. Obviously, my husband didn't want to be around me right now, so I left for Susan's house. I'm not there 2 minutes when my phone starts blowing up with messages saying things like divorce and traitor, along with a novel-length rambling about what an evil person I was. As I sat there on the floor at my neighbor's house, I made the decision to return to my house. It was my house, after all. I was concerned that he might destroy more of my things, but was terrified that he would burn the house down, with my dogs trapped inside, which is something that he has threatened to do before. That thought alone was just unbearable. When I came back in, I was yelled at some more until Jack got him back into the garage. Poor Jack. I know that he probably had better things to do that night than to be caught in the middle of this drama. After a few minutes, I could hear things being thrown around, followed by grunts. My husband was going absolutely berserk. All the while, Jack was doing his best to calm him down, pinning him to the ground with an armbar. I later found dents in my car and more of my things destroyed. I don't know why my existence was setting him off so badly, but I immediately regretted my decision to return. But as I stated before, this was my house. If my soon-to-be ex-husband needed to go vent, he can go somewhere else with his friend. Maybe the cops would catch up with him, and he could spend the night in jail. I even went as far as to text his dad, letting him know what was going on with his son. His response was, "I don't know what to tell you. He's a grown man." Psh, I actually laughed when I read that text. I loved my mother-in-law, but my father-in-law was a real piece of shit. That woman deserved better. at around 5 a.m. He finally went to bed, and Jack crashed on the couch. I couldn't sleep, for obvious reasons. I ended up staying awake for more than 48 hours. I about lost my damn mind. Another thing to note is that I'm physically disabled after a car accident where a driver hit me while I was sitting at a stoplight. So between the chronic pain I already suffered with on a daily basis, I had to add on the stress caused by this shit show, not to mention the additional pain from being jerked off the couch and thrown to the floor. It was truly a living nightmare. I understand that he had problems, but I honestly tried to make my marriage work. Things had become toxic. There was only so much abuse I could take, and I finally filed for divorce some years later. I had hoped that his mental state would improve over time, but that never happened. He's now long gone from my life, but remembering all this still makes me shake with fear. That huge altercation around Christmas, after his mother's untimely death, marked the beginning of the end for our relationship, but I'm thankful that I made it out alive. A couple of years after this incident, I actually spoke with a psychologist. I was told that he likely had what is called borderline personality disorder. But keep in mind that this was just an educated guess. As you can imagine, there is a lot more to the story than what I mentioned here. What happened that night wasn't an isolated incident. In the time between what happened that night and our eventual divorce, I lived in a constant state of fear, anxiety, and stress. Bear in mind, his handguns were eventually returned to him, but I think he had to get rid of them after we divorced. I think he currently lives with his friend Jack. As far as I know, he doesn't have a job or any type of relationship and still has his temper tantrums from time to time. Thankfully, I no longer have to deal with it. I implore any woman dealing with a similar situation not to endure the same levels of abuse I did. There comes a point where you need to think about your own well-being. I was fortunate enough to get out alive, but not without trauma that I have to live with for the rest of my life. This incident happened in the spring of 2019. For some context, I'm a 23-year-old man. I have 2 brothers, and I come from a wealthy family. 4 years ago, we received a large inheritance from our grandfather. So my brothers and I decided to travel the world for 6 months. I booked multiple one-way flight tickets and 4-star hotels, including a trip to Martinique. It's a small island in the Caribbean and has a population of about 350,000 people. And I have 2 half-sisters, Anissa and Sabrina, who live there as well. On April 5th, 2019, it was time for me to head to Martinique. I would be staying at my sister's place during my 3-week stay. The first week there went well. My sisters showed me around the island and the beaches that were less populated by tourists. But the next week is where things took a turn for the worse. My sisters and I decided to go on a short getaway outside of the capital city and spend 2 days at a small secluded beach. We rented out a condo right on the shore. When we first arrived, everything was going great, but when nighttime rolled around, I decided to go on a walk just to get some alone time. I even went into the water for a night swim. While I was relaxing in the water, I felt somebody grab the back of my neck and dunk my head into the water. I tried to get away, but the person behind me was too strong. I couldn't break the hold. But I did manage to get my head above the water and yell for help. My 2 sisters came running out, and luckily, Sabrina had a pistol with her. As soon as she saw the man pushing my head back into the water again, she fired off a shot that hit him in the back. It wasn't fatal, but it got him off of me. Anissa helped me back onto the shore, while my assailant silently crawled out of the water. The police arrived a short time later and the man was arrested. The scariest part is that even with a bullet in his back, the man didn't make a sound or say a single word. As he was being hoisted into the ambulance, his cold eyes never stopped staring at me. I never thought something like this would ever happen to me. The rest of my time in Martinique went well, but I was happy to leave that place. It turns out that Martinique is not a very safe island. Outside of the capital city, there are many cases of homicides, kidnappings, sexual assaults, and drugs. To this day, I still travel often, but I'm much more cautious now, and I make sure to do some research before I visit a country I've never been to before. Hey everyone, this is your Uncle Unit. Thank you so much for checking out my video. If you have a story that you would like me to narrate on this channel, please send it to my email, unit522submit@gmail.com. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any future content. And if you would like to support this channel even further, you can check out my merch store. There's a link for that in the description. I look forward to hearing from you, and I hope you stay tuned for the next video. Until then, never forget.